The Republicans are winning here. The president is winning here.
Either of you ever have any evidence of quid pro quo? Mr. Morrison.
No, ma'am.
Ambassador Volker.
I did not.
Any evidence of bribery?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Are either of you here today to assert there was an impeachable offense in that call? Shout it out. Anyone?
Where's the document, the smoking gun document that the president committed an impeachable offense? Where is it? It doesn't exist.
Disagreeing with the president's decision on foreign policy matters is in no way an impeachable offense.
We know how it's going to turn out, so we're not really that interested. We're ready to move on.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new week of broadcasting here on American Family Radio and Focal Point. I am your congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host,
as always,
Brian Fisher. Alongside me, Jeff Reed and Rob Gardner. Good to have you in the conversation. Now what I want to do, don't forget afr.net. You can find podcasts for every program of Focal Point. It's there. You can go back months and years and catch the program, but it's uploaded about 15 minutes after the program. Go to afr.net, click on the podcast button at the top of the page, and scroll down to find Focal Point. You can catch today's podcast. You can subscribe to it, get it delivered to you every single day. So don't forget that. Also, afa.net, that's our opinion site. And Jeff, could you check this out for me? I've got a column up there today about this religious liberty case from the state of Montana. And I use it to illustrate how we ought to be deciding these cases today. It's up. So I encourage you to go there and read it because it's about the Constitution. It's about how the founders intended for us to decide religious liberty disputes. So very, very important to understand that. So I encourage you to go there, afa.net for the column, afr.net for the podcast. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. We are in Acts chapter 24. This is the story of the culmination of Paul's journey to his appearance before Nero, who was the Caesar at the time. He ruled the Roman Empire from 54 A.D., right after Claudius, up through 68 A.D., when Nero committed suicide by draining the blood out of his own body in a warm tub. So anyway, Nero was the guy, one of the worst emperors that Rome ever had. He's the guy that literally fiddled while Rome burned. That's not an exaggeration. There were 14 quarters in the city of Rome. 10 of them burned to the ground in about 64 AD. And what happened, Nero didn't mind because it burned away all these slum dwellings and all. He could rebuild Rome in his own image. So it didn't bother him. And the people started finding out about the fact that Nero wasn't bothered by the fact that 3/4 of the city burned to the ground along with their homes and their businesses. So Nero had to find somebody to blame for that. Couldn't be his fault. In fact, there's some suspicion that he might have even set the thing. Nero said, I got to find some way not to get blamed for this. So he blamed it on the Christians. Blamed it on them. They're the ones that set these fires. They're the ones that are responsible, launched a wave of persecution of Christians all across the Roman Empire. Well, let's quickly read parts of this segment, and then we'll pray it back to God. Now, Paul had been appearing before a governor by the name of Felix in Caesarea. And Felix, we're told, had a rather accurate knowledge of the way. So he knew all about Christianity. He knew the truth claims of Christianity. He knew the truth about Christianity, distinguished from the falsehood about Christianity, but he put them off. And the reason we're told that he put them off is he was hoping to line his own pockets with money from the Apostle Paul. So he was the Joe Biden of the Roman Empire, using his position of political power to line his own pockets. And so Paul wound up being in prison for 2 years. Now, Felix did bring him in. Felix's wife was a Jew. She wanted to hear from Paul more about this situation. So Felix summoned Paul to come appear before him when his wife Drusilla was there with him. And Paul, it says, reasoned with them. It says Felix heard Paul speak about faith in Christ Jesus. Remember that he was told by Ananias when he was converted, remember he was blinded and then his sight was restored, he was told that he would bear witness for Christ before kings. And here he is before governors and kings, and here he is before the highest ranking Roman official in Caesarea, sharing his faith in Jesus Christ. Goes on in verse 25, as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, go away. So his conscience was pricked by the message of the gospel. He just decided he didn't want to deal with it. That's too much for me to handle today. I'm going to put that off. I'm going to think about that tomorrow. Well, tomorrow for Felix apparently never came. And so he died, having passed up his one opportunity to respond to the message of the gospel. You know, when we look at what happened to Kobe Bryant, we'll talk about him a little bit at the end of the first segment, but, he didn't know that Sunday was going to be his last day on earth. He's 41. He's in the prime of his life. He's in the peak of physical health. He's a multimillionaire. He had no idea that Sunday was going to be his last day on earth. And so, ladies and gentlemen, don't pass up. Maybe you're grappling with somebody sharing the gospel with you. You're grappling about whether this stuff is true or not, but you're putting it off because the consequences maybe are kind of frightening for you, just like they were for Felix. You want to put it off because it's going to change your whole life, and you know it, and you don't want to yield control of your life to anybody else. And so you just put it off and put it off, and the day of judgment for you never comes, and the day of reckoning then follows after that, and you will not be ready for it. You know, so I think what Kobe's experience teaches us that we ought to live every day. We ought to live as if Jesus Christ is coming back today. Live as if Jesus Christ is coming back today, and live as if he's not coming back for 1,000 years. So you want to be sure that you are right with Jesus Christ today, because today may be your last day on earth, and if it's not, your last day on earth is going to come, and the only way you can be prepared for that day is to make yourself right with God through Jesus Christ. All right, so 2 years elapsed, and Felix never heard from Paul again, never invited him in again, and then he was transferred out. So a new governor came, a guy by the name of Porcius Festus, Governor Festus. Something about that just cracks me up. Wasn't that one of the Addams families? Uncle, wasn't one of them Festus?
Fester. Fester, yeah.
Oh, Fester, okay. Yeah. So this is not Governor Fester, this is Governor Festus. So he showed up, went down to Caesarea, which is where the Roman power was centralized and located, and the chief priests and the principal men of the Jews laid out their case against Paul. They were trying to impeach him, remove him from the face of the earth. They laid out their case before Governor Festus, and they urged him, asking as a favor against Paul that he summon him to Jerusalem. So they wanted Festus to send Paul to Jerusalem, but they didn't want it because that's where he'd get a fair trial. They wanted to do it because they planned to ambush him while he was on the way to Jerusalem. But anyway, he stayed in Caesarea. Paul managed to stave off this effort to ambush him. When the Jews arrived in Caesarea, they brought many and serious charges against him that they could not prove. Remind you of anything like an impeachment trial? Many serious charges, none of which can be proven. Paul said this in his defense, neither against the law of the Jews nor against Caesar have I committed any offense. Now, Festus wanted to do the Jews a favor. He didn't want to get the leading Jewish authorities upset with him, just a political deal. So he said to Paul, do you want to go up to Jerusalem? He was trying to accommodate the Jews. You want to go up to Jerusalem and be tried there? And Paul said this, I am standing before, he knew what was going on, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal where I ought to be tried. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you yourself know very well, if I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything for which I deserve to die, I do not seek to escape death. So Paul says, look, if I've broken the law, if I've committed a crime, I am willing to face the music. But I've done nothing to the Jews. Nobody's proved a single thing against me. But if there is nothing to their charges against me, if this is all just a political vendetta, no one can give me up to them. I appeal to Caesar. Remember, we've talked about this before, whether Christians even have rights. You know, the circles I operated in many years ago, there was a pastor, a very prominent pastor, said over and over again, Christians have no rights. And it created this sense among all of us, that because of the respect we had for him, that it's inappropriate for a Christian ever to take somebody to court, ever to try to get justice settled in a court of law, or ever to go to court, appeal to the Supreme Court for protection of our constitutional rights. But here, Paul says, I am appealing to Caesar. I'm innocent. I've done nothing regarding what I've been accused of. I appeal to Caesar. And he could do that as a native-born citizen of the Roman Empire. Just like our civil rights, our legal rights are predicated on being citizens of the United States. So Paul said, in a parallel fashion, I am a citizen of Rome by birth. I have rights. The Supreme Court in the Roman Empire was the emperor himself. Paul says, I'm going to exercise my right of appeal to the Supreme Court. And Festus, when he had conferred with his council, answered, to Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar you shall go. All right, well, let's take these things and go to prayer today. We're going to pray for all of our civic leaders because of the important issues of Christianity, religious liberty, and then we'll pray for organizations that protect our constitutional rights. Let's go today, if you join me. Lord Jesus, I pray today for our civic leaders, for our mayor, our governor, our president, and right now for the Senate of the United States, that they will be well acquainted with the way and that their decisions and policies will be kind toward the Christian community and will protect our freedoms. I pray that you will protect their integrity, that they will base their decisions on what is right and just. Please keep them from being influenced by either money or pressure from special interest groups in their actions. As Paul pressed his legal rights in this episode, so may your disciples today understand and press for the legal rights that we have been granted. Make us unafraid, as Paul was, to insist that our rights under the law be respected. I pray that organizations which work to protect our religious liberty will be granted great success in protecting our freedoms of speech, of religion, and association. I pray also that you will raise up leaders in our own day like Paul, who will be unafraid to speak your truth to those in positions of political power and be able fearlessly to reason with them about faith in Jesus Christ and about righteousness, self-control, and the coming judgment. I pray for myself. I pray for my family. I pray for the listening audience of Focal Point, every man, woman, and child right now within the sound of my voice. Pray for every man and woman and child in this land. And I pray that all of us will, through the power of your Holy Spirit, be righteous in character and conduct. Grant us in full measure the fruit of the Spirit of self-control. May we be fully prepared by our faith in you for the judgment to come. May our conduct in every area of life be free from blame, that our consciences may be clear, and that there may be no foundation for any charge against our character. I pray that you will grant us opportunity in this coming week to speak to others about our faith in Christ. Open the ears of those around us to listen as we share with them truths about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come. This we ask in your name. Amen. Again, want to mention my column. It's up at afa.net on deciding religious liberty cases according to the Founders' Constitution. And I argue, I have 10 seconds to sum it up, but I'm going to argue that that case should have been decided by the Montana State Supreme Court. Never should have gotten to the Supreme Court, and I explain why in the column. So please read that at afa.net, deciding religious liberty cases according to to the Founders' Constitution. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby...
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. Just before we went to the break, we were talking about this Governor Festus, before whom the Apostle Paul appeared, made his appeal to the Supreme Court of Rome. I appeal to Caesar you shall go. Talking about whether Christians can biblically press their legal and constitutional rights. The answer is absolutely yes. But I was asking the guys about Festus. That was a familiar name to me. And I thought, well, maybe if somebody in the Adams family know it was Fester. There was an Uncle Fester, but there was a Festus on Gunsmoke. And Rob, what would Festus always say on Gunsmoke?
Marshall Dillon.
Okay, that's Rob Gardner doing his inimitable
I told you it was
Festus impersonation.
That's good radio right there.
There it is. All right, enough of that foolishness. Want to bring in our special guest. Rick Shaftan is his name. He's a pollster, been a frequent guest on this program before. Rick, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on. I got a little Facebook note saying apparently I was on exactly 5 years ago today.
Oh, is that right?
Show.
All right.
So
well,
there you go.
We believe in having our favorite. We believe in having our favorite guests on at least twice in a decade. So it's good to have you back. But anyway, we love to have you. Well, we love to have you here in the middle of an election season because you are a pollster and you are somebody who consults on campaign strategy. You've even run campaigns, that kind of thing. So I wanted to bring you in because you've done some polling in the state of Iowa. So I want to talk with you about what is going on from your vantage point right now in the state of Idaho. State of Iowa. By the way, that reminds me, Idaho and Iowa constantly confused in news stories. When I lived in Idaho, I'm taking all your time here, Rick. Please forgive me. I'll extend your time here. But they would always confuse Idaho and Iowa. Even the newspapers would do it. So I was even in never mind. We got to hear from Rick here. So anyway, Rick, I'm looking at the latest polling data from New Hampshire. This is New Hampshire, not Iowa. But Bernie Sanders is up to like a 7-point lead in New Hampshire, and I believe he has jumped into the lead in Iowa. But anyway, I want you to bring us up to speed. What are you seeing, boots on the ground, polling data? What do you see stand out to you in Iowa right now?
Well, I was seeing actually Sanders having a little trouble, especially with older people who are more likely to show up at these sort of things. Polling these things is very tricky. The one thing that everybody seems to be seeing, though, is that Joe Biden is totally collapsing. And if there's one victim of this impeachment scam, it's Joe Biden. Because everybody's like talking about Hunter Biden. I mean, if he testifies, it doesn't make a difference. He's just tagged with this Hunter Biden thing and the whole, son of a bee and the prosecutor and all that. I mean, all people know is that Biden did something. I think he's got a big problem. He's 78, so that works against him. I think the beneficiary of his collapse is going to be Amy Klobuchar, who nobody's really seeing. But she's coming off as, a non-kook. I mean, in the kook primary, she comes off as less crazy than Bernie or Elizabeth Warren. She's from the state next door, and I think she could gain some traction. And Iowa's big on elevating a new face. And Buttigieg is not a new face now. He's been around, so he's not the new face. I could see her being that new face who gets a boost out of Iowa, and that could help. That could totally upend New Hampshire.
Now, but Rick, Amy Klobuchar, I mean, she's been in the thing from the beginning. She's the candidate that eats her salad on planes with her fork. That's the lasting image of Amy. Comb. Why do I keep saying that? Eats her salad with a comb. Anyway, she just seems to me like such a long shot, Rick. Does she have any chance of gaining enough traction to be a serious contender in Iowa?
Yeah, here's what happens. You go to caucus night, you need 15% to get a delegate. If Biden comes short of 15%, his people have to choose where to go. So they have a choice. They have Bernie Sanders, or they're not going to go, probably, or Elizabeth Warren. Then you have Buttigieg and Klobuchar. And she's coming off as less liberal than the rest of them, and that gives her an edge. And because Bloomberg's not competing in Iowa, and I'll get to him in a minute, she really kind of becomes the so-called moderate alternative. I also think you're going to see a little bit of activity for Tom Steyer, too, in there. I think Steyer is going to do a little better than people think.
So it's interesting to me, and I'm reading a story. I'm looking at a headline here, Rick, and see what your opinion is about this, about the swing counties in Iowa. There were 31 counties, I believe. I'm trying to get the exact number here. 31 counties in Iowa that backed President Obama twice and then voted for Donald Trump. So what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen in those 31 counties? They voted for Obama in 08. They voted for Obama in 16. And then, in 08 and 12, and then I'm going to stop talking here. And then they voted for Trump in 2016. What's going to happen, do you think, in those counties in the Iowa caucuses?
They're not going back to the Democrats for a long time. A lot of these counties, there's a belt between pretty much the Appalachian Mountains and the Missouri River, more or less, where you had major gains for Trump, and those areas are not moving back to the Democrats. The Democratic Party is getting so crazy now, they make Barack Obama look like a conservative. I was talking to somebody last night, because Bloomberg's strategy is he's going to sit out the first couple of races, wait till there's a front runner, and then spend his $80 billion against the front runner. So let's say it's Bernie Sanders and Michael Bloomberg, right? And Sanders is Sanders, and Bloomberg is trying to be, not Sanders. So I asked this first. I said, tell me on what issues Bernie Sanders and Michael Bloomberg are different. They're really the same on everything, other than Bernie Sanders wants to communize America today, and Bloomberg says let's do it over 20 years. I mean, other than that, I don't know where they differ on any issues, global warming and guns and abortion and all this transgender silliness and everything else. I don't know where they differ. I think they're just the same. It's just style.
Yeah, so it's maybe maybe where Sanders is getting his juice is that he's willing to say publicly what the other candidates are saying privately, but he has the authenticity to just lay it out there before the voters.
Well, he's Bernie Sanders. I mean, he's just this angry guy from Brooklyn. Every Jew who grew up in New York had a relative like Bernie Sanders. Why are you kids laughing? Do you know there's a strike in West Virginia right now? There's people with no health care. You think it's funny? You have a full stomach. You know, across the world, people don't eat. I had relatives like that. It's like the angry old socialist who, is just an angry old socialist.
He's like the grumpy grandpa that sits on the front porch in his rocking chair and yells at the kids to get off the lawn.
Fun. Where's Uncle Bernie shows up and yells at everyone.
Now, let me ask you this about Sanders. I've read a number of stories. Even apparently Barack Obama is getting ready to come out publicly against Bernie Sanders because he's so radical, even apparently for Obama's taste, that he's freaking them out. So the establishment, the Democratic Party, getting freaked out by Bernie Sanders. How do you think that's going to play out?
I think it plays to Sanders. It's the same way as Bush attacking Trump. I mean, they look at Obama now. It's things have gone so far that Obama is now the mainline party establishment. It's like we look at Bush. When Bush attacked Trump, it helped Trump.
Wow.
I think you could see some of the same thing here. I think you could see it actually they're trying to steal it from Bernie again. Look what they did the last time they stole it from Bernie. They're going to do it again.
Now,
right? I mean, I see that exactly as how it would play out.
Let me ask you about that.
And who's a better opponent for Bernie Sanders than a billionaire, a corporate billionaire?
That's right. Yeah.
Bloomberg is a billionaire. He steals from the poor, lines his pockets, throws us crumbs.
So if the Democrats wanted to influence it away from Bernie, even rob him of the election like they did in 2016 with the superdelegates, how would they go about doing it? I've read a story about the technology that the Democrats are using in Iowa to relay the results using kind of a voting app that the people that are reporting the caucus results are going to use. And there's security concerns about that and all that. So, I mean, that might be one way they could. But do you see a realistic way for the Democratic establishment to so interfere with the election process that they could jilt Bernie Sanders again?
I hope they try, because it'll just create even more chaos. The thing that they're very afraid of is, this isn't like George McGovern or Walter Mondale, where people and a lot of Democrats could say, well, I'm a Tennessee Democrat. I'm not supporting Mr. McGovern. I support my local Tennessee. Right? They don't exist anymore. There are no more There's no more Tennessee Democrats. They're all socialists. Every Democrat in this country is either a socialist or they have to pretend to be. So it's impossible for these Democrats to run away from the ticket the way they did in 1972 or 1984. They just can't do it, and they're going to be They're going to have this completely wrapped around their neck. If they denounce Bernie Sanders, their left-wing crazies who control their Democratic primaries will go berserk.
Now let me ask you this.
So they got a big problem there.
Well, Rick, let me ask you this question.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Here's to this. We talk about all our right-wing ideas that we have, pro-life and pro-gun and cutting taxes and stopping this transgender nonsense and everything else, which is all fairly mainstream. I mean, people divide. They may agree or disagree, but it's not like we have 5-10% viewpoints. When you ask people what they think of socialism or raising taxes for this climate change or all these other ideas they have very little popular support. And yet they're going into Virginia now and passing all of these things because they're not focused on winning the next election. They're focused on implementing their socialist agenda. When our guys get in, the first thing they do is figure out what they can't do. So it's like, well, yeah, we campaigned against this, but it's not the right time yet. We have to change public opinion. We have to bring the the Democrats don't worry about that. They just do it, and if they lose the election, hey, they've socialized America. That's their job. And all people need to realize that.
Let me ask you this question, too. I've read some stories about Sanders supporters who are quite rabid. I mean, there's a lot of energy at Sanders rallies. I mean, it's the closest thing the Democrats have to anything that Donald Trump was able to produce, much lower scale. But there's some genuine energy and intensity there. And so he's got some pretty rabid supporters in the millennial generation. And I'm reading rumblings that they're talking about staying home if Bernie doesn't get the nomination or they feel like he was gypped out of it. Do you think that'll happen, and what kind of an impact would it have if they did?
It's possible. I think that what will happen is they'll end up voting third party maybe. A lot of them will come back and back the candidate against Trump just the same way a lot of us voted for Mitt Romney or, right? I mean, you want to stop Obama, we voted for Romney. I even voted for McCain, but only because of his running mate. But so I think a lot of them will come back. Some of them won't, but I think they'll all vote, and they'll still be down ballot. I mean, it's really, they need the turnout. So they can't let these folks stay home, or they're going to have a down ballot disaster.
One last
They already are going to have problems with Hispanics and Asians not producing the numbers they want. I think the black turnout's not going to be where they want it to be. I'm not saying Trump's going to get a high share of the African American vote. I think the turnout's going to be down. I think that blacks will show their support for Trump by not voting for the Democrat.
One last
because
question.
If they say they're supporting Trump, it's just all kinds of social consequences that.
One last question for you, Rick, before I let you go. Unless you've got a better Festus imitation than Rob Gardner does, I'll keep you for that. But I'm looking at this article that indicates there were.
I stick to Bernie.
You got a pretty good Bernie. Yeah, you gave us a little flash of Bernie there for a bit. Anyway,
I'll probably do more of it. Don't get me going here.
Anyway, 3,000 counties in 2016 voted by more than 20 percentage points for Obama in 2012, and then turned around and voted by more than 20 percentage points for Donald Trump in 2016. What do you think is going to happen to those 3,000 counties? You're saying the Democrats that have switched to Trump, they're not going back. Do you think that's going to happen nationwide?
I think what's going to happen is these high-income areas that shifted from Romney to Clinton, a lot of them areas where homes are selling for over $350,000. Almost every one of those areas, you had a slide away from Republicans in 2016. I think a lot of those voters are going to come back. A lot of these high-income voters, first off, they're doing well economically. They see that the Democrats are all about socialism, and it's a big problem. And I tell a story, and I think it's going to be true. I think you're going to have two Muslim businessmen next year, and they're going to say, Trump, he hates the Muslims. He's a tool of the Jews. Israel controls them. But business is good. We can't give up. We can't give up what we have. We can't have socialism. We have to vote for this man whether we like it or not. And that's exactly what Trump says. You don't have to like me. You just have to vote for me.
Yeah, and it seems like it's a tough time to be running against Trump, with the unemployment numbers at historic lows, with wage gains at decade highs among the lower quintile.
We're going to start a war with Iran 2 weeks ago, and now they fire a few missiles. It was like a fireworks show. Nobody got hurt, and now it's over.
Yeah. All right. Well, my guest has been pollster and campaign strategist Rick Shaftan. Rick, appreciate you dropping by, and you get any more hot-breaking developments on the polling front, let me know, and we'll bring you back to talk about that. My guest again, Rick Shaftan. Good to have you on, Rick.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, you bet. Okay. Rob, just one more time as we go to the break, just for Gunsmoke fans. What was it? I can't remember. What was it that Festus always used to say?
Marshall Dillon.
All right. He also had a limp, right? Walked with a cane or something like that?
No cane.
No cane, just walked with a limp.
Had a limp, yeah.
All right. Marshall Dillon. Well, when we come back, we will talk about the other news today, including getting you up to speed on impeachment. This latest bombshell, quote, end quote, from John Bolton's book, where he claims that he heard Donald Trump say that he was withholding aid until he got an announcement about this investigation. The reality is it wouldn't even matter if he did. I'll explain why.
Here's Twyla Braze with today's Health Freedom Minute.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point, the home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Buckle up, we are heading for the checkered flag. A couple of quick words about Kobe Bryant, just a shocking and sudden and tragic death of a guy absolutely in the prime of his life. He had had a sexual scandal a number of years ago. Apparently, got his mind right. He started getting involved in nurturing his faith. Apparently, was a very devoted father. I had enough money that he could fly in a helicopter to home games at the Staples Center when he was playing for the Lakers. He wouldn't take a limo. He'd take a helicopter. And he was taking his daughter, whom he coached in basketball, taking her to a basketball tournament, apparently at a training facility that he owned and operated. When the helicopter went down, they don't know exactly what caused it, but I've read some eyewitness accounts of the crash that there was only 60 feet of visibility at that time, and that when the helicopter was descending, somehow they figured out the helicopter was descending at a rate of 4,000 feet per minute. That's a pretty rapid descent. That sounds a little bit like engine trouble. There was somebody that said he heard the engines, didn't see it because it was so thick, but it sounded like the engines weren't operating at full capacity. So we will find that out. But flying a helicopter, flying any kind of plane in fog, if you don't have the best in navigational equipment is a real hazard. When I was younger, I had an older friend who was rich, and he invited us up to his ranch on the Salmon River in the wilderness area. Only way in was to fly in or hike in. And so it was kind of fashionable for rich people from the East Coast to fly to Idaho and then take a private plane into these ranches along the Salmon River because it was wilderness area. Once you were in there, you weren't going to have to worry about being disturbed by anybody. And the day that we left to come back after one of the trips in there, and we had to wait till a certain time of the day to take off, because if you took off too soon, you wouldn't be able to get enough lift, and you'd just crash into the mountains on the other side of the ravine. And there were some businessmen from Florida that were leaving the same time we were, the same morning, and the pilot apparently got lost in the fog and wound up crashing right into a mountainside. Everybody on board perished. So maybe something like that happened. The pilot's visibility was diminished because of the fog. I was in an airplane, a small airplane one time, with a guy that wasn't instrument rated. It didn't tell me that. So we're in the middle of this fog. So when you're in fog, you can't see anything. I mean, it's not like you can see something over here, over there. You're just surrounded by it, no visibility at all, and you have no idea what you might be running right into. So maybe something like that happened to Kobe Bryant. Kind of a cool thing. It was great to see Kobe Bryant, his commitment to his daughter, his love for his daughter, all that kind of stuff. And yesterday, the Toronto Raptors and the San Antonio Spurs, remember Kobe Bryant's number was 24, and what those two teams did, I thought this was a really cool thing to do this in honor of him, is they both, when the game started, they both ran out the 24-second shot clock. Remember, if you don't get a shot off in 24 seconds, it's a turnover. So what these teams deliberately did after the tip-off, they dribbled until the 24-second shot clock ran out, and then the other team did exactly the same thing as a way of honoring Kobe Bryant. One other thing about Kobe Bryant, he was asked by Chris Collinsworth back in the 2008 Summer Olympics if he was still patriotic. And here's Collinsworth's question to him. Is that a cool thing to say in this day and age, that you love your country, that you're fighting for the red, white, and blue? It seems sort of like a day gone by. Here's what Kobe Bryant said. No, it's a cool thing for me to say. I feel great about it, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I mean, this is a tremendous honor. So Chris Collinsworth says, where does this patriotism come from inside you? And he said, well, it's just our country. We believe it's the greatest country in the world. It has given us so many great opportunities, and it's just a sense of pride that you have, that you say, you know what? Our country is the best. That was Kobe Bryant, and we wish God's grace and peace on every member of his family. Okay, well, let's get updated on the impeachment thing. I've often said about Adam Schiff, the most dangerous place in America is anywhere between Adam Schiff and a television camera. You don't want to get in that space. And Adam Schiff, Gerald Nadler was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House. Somebody totaled up the amount of time that they spent talking, Adam Schiff and Gerald Nadler. Those guys are the two guys that are leading this whole shindig. And Adam Schiff spoke for 505 minutes. 505 minutes. Poor Gerald Nadler, he spoke for 102 minutes. It's like, ever were a fan of roller derby when you were growing up? Roller derby, they go round and around and around this narrow track on roller skates. And then the way you score points is you get your what do they call the guy that scores the points?
I don't remember. It was a long time ago.
Anyway, you got a guy, and you score points because he goes on the outside, and he powers past everybody on the other team, and you get 1 point for everybody he passes. Anyway, it was a pretty vicious thing. And you get guys that would be elbowed completely off that roller derby track. They'd spill over the handrail down to the floor into the cheap seats. And that's what Adam Schiff did to Gerald Nadler, just completely smoked him on airtime.
Yeah, Adam Schiff was on the TV so long, my TV at home so long last week that when I turned the TV off, there was still an image of him burned on the screen.
Burned his image into the screen. Well, I have no trouble believing that. All right, so this book that John Bolton is going to come out with says that has the claim in it. Apparently, it was leaked. I don't know if anybody's actually seen the copy of the manuscript, but the publisher's not denying that this kind of thing is in there. That Trump personally told him that the aid to Ukraine should be frozen until Ukraine announced their investigation into corruption in Ukraine. Now, here's the point I'm making. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to impeachment, it doesn't even matter if Trump said that. It doesn't matter if Trump did that. This quid pro quo business, that is not a crime. And Donald Trump has a responsibility, a legal duty, not to send American aid to another country if it's got a problem with corruption. So Donald Trump was doing his presidential duty because we knew about corruption in Ukraine. Wasn't a mystery to anybody. Even Rick Shaftan said, no matter how much Joe Biden tries to escape this, the American people, they think of Joe Biden, they think of Ukraine, they think of Hunter Biden, and they think of corruption. And Rick Shaftan said he thinks it's eating in to Biden's number. So it wouldn't even matter. If it was true, it wouldn't even matter because Donald Trump has a responsibility to investigate corruption in Ukraine. They've got a legal duty based on a treaty that we signed with them to cooperate with us when we have concerns about investigations like this. They don't have a choice in the matter. They have a legal obligation. They signed the treaty. Bill Clinton signed it. They've got to cooperate with us in investigations. So this is not a crime. It's the president doing his job. Even if he told people I'm holding it until Ukraine announces the investigation, that's still not a problem. And quid pro quo, this is how nations do business all of the time. I'm going to grab a clip right up the front here. It's an impeachment clip. I think this is from Seculo. It talks about the number of times where aid was actually withheld. What clip is that?
Clip 8.
Clip 8, is that what it is? Okay, yeah, Jay Sekulow, I think. Talking here, this is the first clip from his defense of President Trump, which, by the way, is powerful. Caught a little bit of Ken Starr today defending the president. Really, really terrific. Well, let's listen to Jay Sekulow on the president's team, clip number 8.
In September 2019, the administration announced that it was withholding over $100 million in aid to Afghanistan over concerns about government corruption. In August 2019, President Trump announced that the administration and Seoul were in talks to substantially increase South Korea's burden sharing of the expenses of U.S. military aid support for South Korea. In June, President Trump cut or paused over $550 million in foreign aid to El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala because those countries were not fairly sharing the burdens of preventing mass migration to the United States. In June, the administration temporarily paused $105 million in aid to Lebanon. The administration lifted that hold in December, with one official explaining that the administration continually reviews and thoroughly evaluates the effectiveness of all United States foreign assistance to ensure that funds go towards activities that further U.S. foreign policy and also further our national security interest, like any administration would.
That's good, Rob. Let's cut that one right
there.
there. So basically, Jay Sekulow is saying, look, this is routine. This happens all the time. If you've got significant American interests that are at stake, you're not going to send money. Presidents don't do it. Presidents before Trump did the same thing. Obama withheld aid. In fact, Obama never sent the lethal aid that was actually approved by Congress. Never sent it to Ukraine. Donald Trump, in the end, did not withhold aid. When they say he withheld aid, that is not true. The only time you can be accused of withholding aid is if you hold on to it and the deadline passes. Then you are withholding aid. Trump didn't do it. He sent Ukraine every single last dollar they were entitled to. And this is just how nations do business. This whole quid pro quo thing That's just absurd. This is how nations do business. You want our aid, you need to cooperate with us by doing this, and we'll send you the military aid. That's just how nations do business. And by the way, this story just broke over the weekend that the Democrats on the House impeachment team, some of the loudest ones, Gerald Nadler, Hakeem Jeffries, Zoe Lofgren, they voted against military aid to Ukraine. Nadler voted against it in 2018. Nadler voted against another aid package to Ukraine 2 days after he chaired the impeachment hearing last fall. So these three members of the impeachment team thought so little of Ukraine that they voted against giving them any kind of military aid whatsoever. And don't forget, Donald Trump sent them lethal aid when President Obama refused to do it. All right, let's go to clip number 3. This is Adam Schiff, the perennially present Adam Schiff, talking to Chuck Todd. And remember, Schiff had said, look, you better be careful with Donald Trump because he wants your head on a pike. And a lot of Republicans took offense at that, as well they should. Some of them said he kind of had me on witnesses till he did the head on a pike thing, and then he lost me right there. Here's Adam Schiff talking to Chuck Todd about that.
What do you make of the criticism that some Republican senators who you might want to see vote for witnesses didn't like your head on a pike comment? Murkowski, Collins, and Ernst, all three Republican senators who are might be open to witnesses, thought you got too personal.
Well, I don't think it was personal to refer to this CBS story. What may be personal, though, and I think I have to be very candid about this, is I made the argument that it's going to require moral courage to stand up to this president.
So it wasn't personal. That head on a pike thing, that's not personal, unless it's your head that he's talking about. And he says it's not personal, but if you don't vote for this, you are a lily-livered coward. That's what he said to the Senate Republicans. Right, clip number 4, just enough time to squeeze this in. This is Mark Levin. I play these clips every once in a while, so the executive producer gets to hear what I could sound like. Here's Mark Levin, clip 4.
Either of you ever have any evidence of quid pro quo? Mr. Morrison.
No, ma'am.
Ambassador Volker.
I did not.
Any evidence of bribery?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Not that I can recall.
No, they did not.
He said, I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo.
You testified that you had no direct knowledge of any nefarious motivations to withhold aid to Ukraine, correct?
Correct.
And to your knowledge, you testified that there were no strings attached to the aid, correct? That's page 184 of your deposition.
Yeah, no such knowledge.
In this impeachment hearing today, where we impeach presidents for treason or bribery or other high crimes, where is the impeachable offense in that call? Are either of you here today to assert there was an impeachable offense in that call? Shout it out. Anyone?
Do you have any information regarding the President of the United States accepting any bribes?
No.
Do you have any information regarding any criminal activity that the President of the United States has been involved with at all?
No.
All right, let's wrap up with this clip from Mark Levin. Clip 5, 20-second clip. We can squeeze it in. Mark Levin, go.
Where's the document, the smoking gun document that the president committed an impeachable offense? Where is it? It doesn't exist. Where's the killer witness? The killer witness, the first-hand witness in the House of Representatives. He or she doesn't exist. They don't exist. There's nothing.
I want to be Mark Levin when I grow up. I just love that guy. All right, here's a word for you from the Scripture. Now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely. May your whole spirit and soul and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. He who calls you is faithful, and he will do it.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.